A prominent mental health advocate is calling for a joint parliamentary inquiry into post-traumatic stress disorder and other psychological injury experienced by police. Former Beyond Blue and Lifeline CEO Dawn O'Neill has announced the push at the launch of a new book on the Lindt Café siege. It comes 8 years on from that attack. She joins us live now. Dawn, appreciate your time. You've been at this book launch today. As I understand it, this book was written by a man we can call Officer A, who shot Man Modest dead all those years ago at the Lindt Café siege. Just give us an insight into his experience with PTSD and the support he was offered and how you think this really highlights a broader problem.
Thanks, Ash. Yes, the book launch was a very moving event, 8 years on, but of course those memories still very fresh for him, other officers that were present and the victims of terror on that day, the survivors and their families. So we very much understand from Ben's book that it was some years later at another siege, about 4 years on after the Lindt Café siege, where his PTSD was finally diagnosed. And in the interim, the level of support that he received when he did reach out for help was woefully inadequate. Did not last very long, so it was limited in its time frame. It wasn't delivered by people with great expertise, specialising in this kind of work. It was a generalist EAP service provided by the police force, which is good for general psychological support, but not for post-traumatic stress disorder. So from Ben's story, the Officer A's story, we can hear that the cries for help were really not heard and the response was not adequate.
And have things changed over that time period, though, do you think? Are you hopeful that all these years on, for example, the officers impacted by this week's Queensland murders, are you hopeful that they will be better supported, that there has been some progress?
Look, I'm sure the police force is trying, and I'm sure that there are many attempts. There's been inquiries, there's been reviews, but the reports that I'm hearing from other officers, other people that are still in the field, that the support is still not adequate. There's still too many hurdles for officers to have to jump over to get the help. It's still limited. They often are not supported to get back to work, not with the level of expertise and support that they need. They are often decommissioned and have to leave the force. There are still way too many suicides, and the psychological injury is not understood well enough and not dealt with appropriately.
And do you have concerns about all frontline workers? Do you think we're seeing the same sort of thing in terms of our AMBOs, our military personnel?
Yes, absolutely, Ash. This is the same for all first responders. The fact of the matter is that we know now, the evidence is very, very clear, that repeated exposure to traumatic events or trauma of any kind is highly likely to result in psychological injury. 1 in 3 people are likely to develop PTSD. And the impacts, if not the right treatment, if not getting long enough treatment, not intensive enough treatment, can be lifelong impairment. So it's really important that our young people entering these forces are not discouraged by feeling like they're not going to get the support of going into our forces. We need them. They perform incredibly valuable work. It's vital to our safety. We are so admirers of their courage and their bravery and appreciate and want to provide the best support for them.
So in terms of this review that you're pushing for, what needs to be the real focus? Is resourcing the key problem here, or is it also attitudes, stigmas that need to change around mental health, particularly for these groups who, as you point out, are seen to be pretty tough cookies in terms of their bravery on those frontline roles?
Yes, they are tough cookies, but they are also human, where none of us are machines. And in spite of the wonderful training that they get, they are just human. And as I said, exposure to trauma for all frontline workers. So certainly with the Joint Parliamentary Committee that I'm calling for, I would like to see us looking at what's best practice around the world. What have other institutions like Defence, like the AFP, what are they doing that's really working well? What are the ambulance services? Where are things going well? What can we learn from? And what can we do better? But I'm also calling for an immediate task force to be set up to ensure that recommendations that have been made out of other Senate inquiries are actually being put in place. On October the 1st of this year, New South Wales legislation added additional responsibilities to employers to make sure that they prevent psychological injury in the workplace and that they protect their workers and make sure that they get supported in preventing psychological injury from occurring. We want to make sure that our police force and other first responder groups get the support they need to implement these new changes. It's complex work. As you say, there are cultural issues to overcome, stigma, self-stigma of the officers concerned, as well as the community-wide stigma. There's beliefs that have to be challenged. There's learning and skill sets that have to be developed. There's restructuring of the way officers might be rotated around their shifts so there's a lot of work that has to be done. It's really complex, it's not simple, and they need our support. They need lots of support. They probably need more funding. There needs to be greater access to experts and skilled professionals in trauma responses to advise the police and advise these other first responder groups so that their staff, the new young people coming in and out of these forces, we want them to be able to stay. We want them to have a long career in these forces. We need them to be able to be well supported and to feel like that they are going to, in spite of having to challenge or to face great threats throughout their career, that they know that they can get the support they need to recover well and get back to work.